Finally tonight we've got Matt Homewood, who I mentioned earlier. He's a local historian and he's a genealogist, and he is going to regale us with tales of strange Sussex sports. So I'll hand over to Matt.
Yeah. Hello. Everyone hear me?
Yes.
Right, well, as a historian, I spent a lot of time going through old newspapers for research. But I'm also, a bit like Tim, or very much like Tim, a very keen runner. And I was often sort of sidetracked when I saw newspaper clippings of old sporting events, athletics events, and cross-country races. And as I delved deeper into this, I found really, really unusual sporting events in Sussex over the last couple of hundred years. So I'm going to take you on a really quick tour of some of the more unusual things that I found. Now I'm going to firstly talk about some of the more normal sports, if you like, that we normally play still today. And then I'm going to ease you into the bizarre world of sports days going back over the last 200 years in Sussex. Now, long before the Brighton racecourse appeared, there was one at Lewes. In 1714, they started the annual summer races. Also at Lewes, because it was the county town, they had the summer assizes there. The assizes were the big, important court cases where they needed specially selected judges to come down and preside over them. So in 1724, what they did, they moved the summer horse races to coincide with the assizes. I'm going to show a lot of clippings from newspapers. You don't have to read through it. I'll point out the interesting bits because, being a historian, I have a pointer. There you go. So this is from 1756, and here you can see, as our late assizes at Lewes, which ended on Wednesday, there was not one prisoner to try. So they'd actually come down for the horse racing. And on Friday last, the King's Plate was run on our downs when only one started. So it literally was a one-horse race. They come all the way down from wherever, from London. They haven't tried anyone, and they've watched a one-horse race. Things got better because on the Saturday they watched the £50 plate. And at the very bottom here, we hear that one day last week Sir Thomas Dyke died. So he's just a footnote at the bottom, one of their colleagues has died. This is the only thing that isn't related to Sussex, but I had to put it in. It was an annual event in the mid-1700s held on Blackheath Common for the pensioners of Greenwich Hospital, where they played 11 one-armed men versus 11 one-legged men. And this was huge. Thousands and thousands of people would descend on Blackheath to watch this annual spectacle. As you can see here, the one-legged men played best, but the one-armed men ran best. There was another version of this. A couple of years ago they reported on it, and it was a really muddy field. And it seemed quite cruel that everyone found it hilarious that most of the men generally fell over and couldn't get back up again. But the sentiment was that they really meant well. These men were out, they were doing something, and it was a very jovial occasion. Athletics. Athletics was huge. In the 1860s, 1870s and beyond, athletics was really big. This chap is Alfred Shrubb. He was born in Sussex and he grew up in Horsham. And see the trophies he's got. But it's not just trophies, you notice all these clocks. And cutlery galore. There's a kettle and there's a lamp. People didn't always win cups. So someone can win a cross-country race, rather prestigious cross-country race, and they'd win a drinks cabinet. Clocks were really a big thing. I mean, you only need one set of cutlery, don't you? But Alfred's kept all his, by the looks of things. Now, this is in the 1870s, this picture was taken. Tom Mantell's another, and they were really good runners, and Tim would appreciate this, and anyone else who runs. These guys were knocking out sort of 14, 15-minute 5Ks They were fast. In fact, there was one guy running at this point, and he ran a race at Rye, and we still have the Rye 10 miler in Sussex, and the time he took back in 1911, if he'd run the Rye 10 miler last year, he would have won it. So these guys were fast. We tend to think they're not as fast as we are now, but no, he would have hammered anyone in this room, basically. They also loved pitting runners against walkers. Walking was just as important as running. And you see these great articles and stories of people who'd walked from London to Brighton in a record time. Crowds would amass along the streets. And here we've got the world champion walker, I don't know how quite he's been given that title, versus this chap here who's a cross-country champion for Sussex. And the walker and the runner would start at exactly the same time. The runner would have to run 4 miles and the walker would walk 3 and see who finished first. And in this case the walker did win, but only by about 200 yards, so it's a pretty close competition. But again, so many people descended onto the dripping pan at Lewes to watch this unfold. But it wasn't just walking versus running. Fred Pettit was an expert hopper. And here, Fred should hop 55 yards, while Albert Banks should run 100 yards. And he always won by about a yard. And I think what he'd done, because results even back then were produced, and he knew Albert Banks well. Albert Banks was a very well-known runner. He knew how far he could run 100 yards in, so he sort of picked his distance, said, I can do 55 yards and I'll give you a race. He also raced Leonard Reed as well, winning by about a yard. And again, this was at Seaford on the cricket pitch, and everyone amassed to watch this big event unfold. Obviously, I've got to talk about football. I'm rubbish at football. I'm a pretty good runner, but I'm rubbish at football. But even I know that is not. That's not how you dribble the ball. Even if you're just playing for Rye United. I think he had some fans. I honestly don't know what these ladies are doing, but it's pretty close, isn't it? Perhaps they were just the Rye United women's squad. He was their trainer. It wasn't all serious, the football. This is a sort of charity event, a fun comic football match. And here you can see, well, there's a Red Cross nurse there, clown, the devil perhaps. I think that might be Little Red Riding Hood and all this. This is the Lewes Police Force in 1921. And again, an annual event, the Lewes Police would play the Lewes Tradesmen. 3,000 people would descend every year onto the dripping pan, which is where this photograph is taken. We get about 600 now watching Lewes FC play, yeah, they had about 3,000. Now the year after this, 1922, I shall read some of the entrants, some of the people as they were dressed. There was a clown, Friar Tuck, a smuggler, a teddy bear, an ancient Briton, a professional buffoon, a female jester, and P.C. Askew dressed as a Chinaman. There were 3 current Arsenal players who went down to Lewes to ref and lines the match. And it was soon found, after about 20 minutes, that they had no jurisdiction whatsoever on the game, and so they ended up joining him. At one point, the man who was dressed as Friar Tuck smacked his head and fell down. The newspaper report says that some men rushed on and fed him a black liquid. And at that point, Friar Tuck jumped up, ran the length of the pitch to the opposition goalie, shook hands with him, and then fell asleep in the nets. And even in the newspaper report, they're not sure if that was actually sort of staged, or whether the man who was dressed as Friar Tuck actually had concussion. But they just left him there. And another case actually in that year, a small boy nicked the ball and ran off with it, and he was chased. And you can imagine just this boy running off, and a clown Friar Tuck, and a Red Cross nurse all running across the fields after him. Obviously, I've got to mention Stallball. Can I have a show of hands for anyone who's not heard of Stallball? Wow, everyone has. Usually you get 1 or 2 who are not from Sussex or Kent, And I had a guy from Surrey a couple of months ago who just said, what the hell are you talking about? What's this stall ball, you know? Oh, you hadn't heard of it. Where are you from?
Well, not Sussex.
No, that's all you need. That's all you need to say. Obviously, a bit embarrassed about being from the north, obviously, or where she's from, but she won't say. Anyway, well, stall ball was extremely popular. Do you know how old this sport is? In 1450, a pamphlet was produced for parish priests asking them not to play stall ball in the graveyards on a Sunday. Because stall ball was known as cricket in the air. You didn't need a flat pitch, you don't bowl onto the ground. So it could be played anywhere, and parish priests would play it in the graveyards between sermons, something to do. It was also a wonderful way for people of all ages, all abilities, to actually have, play some sport, because it wasn't overly energetic. And that's actually demonstrated by Sir William Bull here. Elderly, bow-legged, ill-dressed for the occasion, and a big gut. Which I would normally say was a beer gut, but that's probably more port and pheasant, I would imagine, for him, in 1927. He was the captain of the Men of Sussex team, so that's what you're looking at, really, for stall ball. But a wonderful game for everyone to play as a community. This I just had to bring because it's so weird. This lady's still with her fox fur on. Some Welsh children in the background. Bearing in mind this was at Chailey in 1921. There's a woman with a big stick. It looked like a rifle at first, but I think that's just a stick. This huge chap in the background with a hat. This is actually Mrs. Lloyd George. She's the Prime Minister's wife, who's popped down to Chailey to have a game of stall ball. But again, in a muddy field and a fox fur, you could play stall ball anywhere, really. Now, this is Burrish, as it should be pronounced, in 1905, and it was the young ladies versus the young men. And as it says here, as usual, the young men played left-handed, because obviously, if you've got a team of men playing a team of women at a sport, you've got to handicap the men. So, we're coming to this, whoever touches. And that's how it works, so it was an even game. But I seem to remember at school, I'm sure I couldn't have been the only one, and beyond school actually, if I was playing stall ball, you'd go up to bat with the bat in your left hand, and all the people fielding over there, oh, we've got a left-hander. So they all traipse over to the other side of the field. And as the bowler's coming up, we just change arms and whack it over there to an empty field. That's what I did. They didn't think of it in those days. However, at Alfriston in 1936, they decided enough was enough. It says here, generally when women and men are opposed in team games, it's found necessary to handicap the men so that an even game will result. But not at Alfriston, where the local stall ball club met a men's team on level terms. No left-handed restrictions about batting or bowling or anything like that. And what happened? Well, the women won comfortably. Congratulations. This brings me neatly on to sports days. I love that picture. There's got his braces on so his trousers don't fall down. This is Hawkhurst in 1950. It's the East Sussex and West Kent Sports Day. This dashing chap here, in the programme of events, difficult to say, he's known as Gorgeous Freddy. And he's particularly picked out because they said he was so young and dapper looking, they wondered how he managed to get into the veterans race. But he did, but you can see he didn't win. And if you notice there, for the hardened runners, his foot is over the line, so he'd be disqualified anyway. It wasn't a fun sport, so. This is way back in 1823, we're nearly 200 years ago now, and this is a sports day at Brighton. And you can see there's all sorts of things, there's donkey races, jumping in sacks, jingling matches. Anyone done any jingling lately? Jingling matches. Basically a man would be sent into a field with a bell round his neck and his hands tied behind his back, and sent in after him would be about 20 other men with blindfolds. And what you had to do, he had to basically escape. Whoever managed to bundle him over became the jingler. You sort of wouldn't want to be, would you? Driving the wheelbarrow, hoodwinked. They were obsessed with blindfolding. Any competitor, let's blindfold and make it more interesting. Climbing the pole. Now this was climbing the greasy pole. So you'd have sort of a 20-foot pole, greased up, and there'd be a prize at the top. Quite often a hat, or more often than not, a leg of mutton or some pork or something. So in Brighton, especially in this area, you just got posh people watching poor people trying to climb a greasy pole for a bit of food. If you got what was ever on top of the pole, it was yours. But it was quite a dangerous thing. You did hear people breaking legs because they sort of nearly got there and then slipped. No health and safety in 1823. I think that came a bit later. And as you can see here, foot races, but for gowns, bonnets, shawls, and at the bottom here they won saddles, legs and shoulders and mutton and hats. It was very much practical prizes again. There's also here pig hunts with greased tails, so you couldn't catch them, I suppose. This is one from 5 years later, and again you've got all these things, climbing the pole for a leg of mutton, catching a cock. If you've seen the first Rocky film, Rocky's trainer sends him, right, you've got to catch this hen, basically, and Rocky's running all over the place just trying to catch this hen because they're darting everywhere. Well, here they did it with hands tied behind. I mean, they've got to basically catch a cockerel with their hands tied behind the back. I have no idea how that works. Again, wheeling a barrow, hoodwinked, and jingling for a hat. We've all done that. This is not a greasy pole event, but it's a horizontal pole event. Seaford, 1919. Placed over a pit of cold water, armed with 2 sacks, probably full of sand, and they basically would hit each other around the head till one of you fell in. This poor chap, well, he's lost really, hasn't he? You can see his sack at the bottom there. He's long since lost that. So this bloke's just got free rein to smack his head until he falls in a pool of cold water. Nice. I still think you should bring them back. I had to put this in. 1934 at Shanklin. An accident. It says here the tide was at an exceptionally low ebb, and Mr. C. Moses, a competitor, in falling off the greasy pole, struck his head on the seabed. He was semi-conscious but managed to keep above water until the arrival of a rowing boat. So not only was the greasy pole event a bit dangerous, what they did at Shanklin in 1934 was to have it out at sea. But it was so far out, no one could wade in and get him. They had to send a boat out to get him. So I assume everyone's sort of sitting on the cliffs or on the beach just watching this guy trying to get a leg of mutton or whatever it is off the top of a pole. And I assume he survived. Maybe that was the last time they ever had the greasy pole event at Shanklin. Oh, before I do that, my favourite of all the events, it was massive in Sussex. I've done some research on this. It appears a lot in the West Country, doesn't really appear in the North, but the county it appears most in, between sort of the 1870s right up to 1930s, is Sussex. We were the experts at this. And it's the menagerie race. Come and bring your pet. Don't race yourself, bring your pet and race them instead. I'll give you 10 seconds to look through the list of entries to the menagerie race in Lewes in 1888. Any idea which one of these animals would actually be the best to race in a straight line? In a straight line for a hedgehog. You reckon a hedgehog could beat a hen? It's actually the roosters and the bantams. If you get a hen and you just sort of shove it, it'll just run in the right direction. If you bring your cat and put it down at the start line of 300 yards and tell it to run to the end, just look at you like you're an idiot. I mean, don't bring a pig. Sometimes dogs and cats were banned from, because I presume of fights or something, but one year in Windmill Hill, a fox and a pheasant were both entered into the menagerie race. They were actually handicapped, all these, so a dog or, well, they'd have sheep as well, they would have to run full 300 yards. But to be fair, something like a frog or a hedgehog would sort of get about a 260-yard head start and still lose. This is an artist's impression of a menagerie race. They actually started, they were military events, and here we are in the Middle East. Nothing much to do there, clearly, so they thought they'd race some animals, and this is how it started. So this chap is racing a dog, and this chap's got one as well. I think this is an albatross, someone's decided. I don't know if you can really see it, but he's actually running this albatross. I mean, this, I don't know how they did it. This bloke's being attacked by a monkey, but to be fair, he probably hasn't won this race because he's brought a tortoise with him. This chap's being kicked over by a horse, and in the background you can see other horses. There's a camel there, and a donkey, all going for it. I think that's a bit of artistic licence, that. But that's the sort of thing you get in the 1880s. The village of Barkham was just amazing when it came to menagerie races, the stories that came out of that. Here's one from 1889, 300-yard menagerie race. Popart's dog won, second was a dog led by Chatfield, third was a cat driven by McCarthy, and you got here Sir William Grantham piloted a turkey. So there were specific terms for driving these animals along, and as you can see, these are all the different handicaps. Cats and rats given a 100-yard head start. I mean, just turkeys and guinea fowl, because we all had guinea fowl in those days at home. And 290 yards was used for the beetle that was actually entered. That was 1889. 4 years later, there's another one. Someone's entered a wasp. So you can see that the roosters won, fair enough, Dad, shall we bring the spaniel? No, son, I've got a wasp upstairs. It's a winner. I've been training it. I'm going to leave you with piano bashing. Has anyone here done piano bashing? No. Too young, I think, all of us in here. This is from Little Horsted in 1969. Back in the 50s, 60s, even modest household had a piano in the back room or something. My grandparents had a piano, no one played it, it was just there. And they would 10 a penny, and people realised that no one plays this, let's donate it. And men like this would take it to a field and smash it up. The idea was you'd have a big box with a letterbox sort of sized hole in the top. And the idea was to get the piano into the box. So you'd be armed with hammers, mallets and whatever, and you'd smash it up until the bits were small enough to put in the box. And the first team to get your piano in the box would win. This chap, as you can see, has forgotten his shorts. But as in those days, if you'd forgotten your shorts, you did sport in your pants. And the same applies to adults here as well. So the thing about this, I'm going to wrap this up now, but the thing about all these sports, whether it's that charity football match, the stall ball, the jingling matches, all the piano bashing, it was all about pure enjoyment. And that's aptly demonstrated by Molly and Daphne here, who are thoroughly enjoying pushing Len and Reg, their prospective partners, across the line of the wheelbarrow race. If this was back in the Victorian age, they would be hoodwinked, of course. But they made it easier in the 1950s. Thanks.
Brilliant. I love it. Some of those sports are just incredible. Now, I'm sure we've got questions for Matt, so has everybody got anything they want to ask about some of those ridiculous sports? Because if you haven't, I have. Is there a hand at the back?
It's me, sorry.
That's good.
One of the early clippings said, I think, cutting a goose.
Yes.
You skipped over that.
I know, I had to skip over a lot, I'm afraid. Cutting the goose. I don't think it was a real goose. I think what they actually had, someone told me about this, because when I often give this talk to elderly people who know far more about this than any of us. And I say, I know what that is, my granddad did it, or I did it when I was a kid. And cutting the goose was possibly cutting a rope, or cutting something like that, just as fast as you could. There's something similar. Cleaving the Turk's head was another one, which in the old days, in the army days, back in the 1850s, 1860s, it literally would be, they would have a mock head on a stick and they'd be on a horse and they'd run past it and try and get it. But someone said that actually a Turk's head was also a knot used in sailing, and that was used instead, so it was a replacement of an actual head.
Thank you. Anyone else got a question? Can I come in here? Because I've heard about a couple of sports that I don't know if they still go on, but in Lewis there's it's dwell flunking. I've heard of.
Yes.
Is that what's that? Can you?
Yeah, dwell flunking. It's basically a group of people in a ring, and there's a chap in the middle who's got a bucket full of beer and a stick with a rag on it, and he has to. Basically, his idea is to get the people in the ring. A lot of people, and even if you look on Wikipedia, the Lewis Arms comes up on that. I think it more originated in East Anglia, because you can see a lot of old photographs, not at Lewis, of people dwell flunking, but if you Google it, if you're lucky, you'll find some people from the 1950s and 60s in Suffolk, places like Bungay, having a go at this. They also have pea throwing at Lewis Arms as well, which hopefully will get down in the history books as another sport. It's sort of a sport, There's a fine line. This isn't really sport, is it? But they're enjoying it, and it's sort of energetic. So no, that doesn't sound right. A lot of other things could be. I retract that.
Not a safe method.
Question here.
Are any of these games still going? Or have they all died off?
Do you know, I would love to know. This is it. My friend's got a piano. She wouldn't let me smash it up though. And this is it. I'm trying to find these things out, because actually a lot of these games stopped 100 years ago, let alone just a few years ago. So I'm trying to find people who are old enough to remember. There's a whole list I've got of really unusual sports that were played in these sports days. And so someone has suggested that I do another talk on this, sort of about twice as long, but have a break in the middle, and we have a go at some of those other sports. Get some jingling matches going. Yeah, I'd love to get them back actually somewhere.
Quickly, do you get the original newspapers, or do you go online? I'm just trying to imagine you researching it. Do you actually pick up the old papers? Do you find those?
Well, back in the 70s, a huge amount of those old papers were put onto microfilm. So,
so
like you see in the old American films, they sort of whiz through these things. But now you've got the British Newspaper Archive online, which just is a godsend. 5 years ago, even less than that, I was down the record office actually sort of going through, going a bit blind, looking at these things going across. And now you can actually do searches using their search technology on the web. And it's fantastic. So, just for argument's sake, the Sussex Express, and before then the Lewis Journal it was called, is on there from around 1770 right up to the 1950s. And it's a bit hit and miss, some of their searches, but that's where I found most of my stuff from. So I sort of typed in greasy pole, Sussex, and see what I got, really. Yeah.
Brilliant. Was there another?
Yeah,
sorry.
There's on one of the clippings there was something called pulling a face through a horse collar.
Oh, you're grinning through a horse collar.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now that still goes on in Cumbria.
That's it. That's gurning, isn't it? Yeah. So I think that was our version down here, grinning through a horse collar, which I still don't really understand. It seems so out of place in the sports days, just grinning through a horse collar.
Brilliant. We had one.
I was just going to ask where your interest came from. What made you want to research this?
Well, it's because I am a runner, and when I was doing some research, I saw a few articles on athletics. I was just amazed that these things happened and so long ago, because the Lewis Athletic Club was formed in 1984, and not many people running in Lewis before then. Running wasn't a big thing from really throughout the whole of the 1900s, right up to the 1980s, really, when marathon at Brighton started in 82, 81, something like that. And so I was amazed to see these reports of these amazing runners in the Victorian age who were so quick. It was unbelievable. Tom Mantell, for instance, known as the Countryman, he was from Lewis, and he used to go up to London and win all the races. They knew him as the Countryman because he was from the sticks down somewhere in Sussex. he used to practice difficult corners. That was brilliant. I've never done. We never did that in training at the club.
That's where I'm going wrong, I think. I need to work more.
But it was. I was just fascinated by these guys who are long forgotten and their achievements, and because of that, I ended up looking at these sports days with people with slightly less achievements. But just as fun.
Brilliant. And there's a hand up in the middle.
One at the back.
Yeah, there's plenty of places around the country that do various sporting events like cheese rolling and rolling down a hill and things like that. But if you had your way and you could organise a sporting event once a year in Eastbourne, what would you do and where would you do it?
In Eastbourne and where? Well, I'm not from Eastbourne. That's a difficult one.
The winter gardens, I think.
Yeah, okay, well I'll do it there. Or bring back the greasy pole and put it out in the sea and let's have some let's see what happens. We'll have a rowboat on standby. I don't know, I just think jingling matches would just be pure fun, wouldn't they? I'm quite, and if anyone's got an old piano...
Jingling on the western lawns.
Yeah, there we go.
It's an absolute must.
It's got to happen, isn't it? It's got to happen.
I mean, someone's got to come up with
You've done
a venue to jingle on the western lawns.
Yeah.
I think it could be a Harry's thing, Andy.
Yeah, I'm thinking of proposing it.
Any more questions? In which case, then can I just say, can we thank Matt again for